Welcome back to the table. Ryan and I just played Heat, Pedal to the Metal. And in fact, truth be told, we did not play it here. What you see here is just a facade. We just set this up. We did not play it here. We actually went over to a friend's house so that we could play it at 3 players because, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, this is a racing game that probably benefits from more players.
Yeah, I would say so. And I've played it with more players. And when I played it, I knew David was probably going to really enjoy this game. So I really wanted to get a play in with David and kind of show him the game. But I also wanted to see how it felt at 3 players or even 2 players. Because I think when you're talking about a racing game, I think that's the number one question people are going to ask is, does it need to be at max player count? And this does play up to 6 players.
Yeah, and I would say the game is going to differ. Now, like he said, you've played with 5?
Play with 5, 6, and then 3.
Oh, you have played with 6. So I can speak to the lower player counts, which I think is where people would have the most concern. And I don't think the way this game is built and the things that are important to this game don't revolve around player count as much. Now, you can throw player count out the window too, because there is a system for adding in any number of what they call legends to play with you, which are AI effective cards that can run alongside you. But even at 3 players without any AI, we had a lot of fun. Now with player count, it's going to be a lot of that. There's what they call slipstreaming and stuff where you can kind of get up behind, like drafting.
Like drafting effectively.
You get up behind a car, and if you finish your turn there, you can kind of like slingshot around them and stuff like that. That's going to happen a lot more with more players. There are going to be some times where things get clogged up a little bit.
Yeah.
Obviously, more with more players. That didn't happen once in our
not
game.
when we play with 3 players, but I do appreciate that they included that legend system because it does let you experience this game solo, and you're going to use a few to basically substitute player count. So even if you're playing solo, if you want the experience of a 3-player game, you can have it, or if you want the experience of a full 6-player game, you can bring 5 legends in and effectively have 6 players. And like you mentioned, you could use it in a 3-player game, or even a 4-player game can bring in 2 legends and effectively play the 6-player game, no matter the actual player count.
Now, we will give you a brief overview of kind of what this game is doing and what it's all about.
It's about Heat.
This is from the designers of Flamme Rouge. If you haven't played Flamme Rouge, it's another racing game, but with bicycles, and you have 2 different racers on your team, and you're effectively playing a card on one or 2, both sides of your board, that are going to be revealed and then affect your 2 different bikers on the board. This one plays quite a bit differently. If someone says, is it, just like Flamme Rouge but different? It's, in my opinion, significantly different enough by a long shot that it feels like a completely different game to me.
That being said, though, if you like Flamme Rouge, this does have a lot of the elements that I personally liked about Flamme Rouge, like the slipstreaming, like the positioning. It doesn't have the hills that you're managing like Flamme Rouge does, but it does have speed limits that you're managing.
The corners,
so
you're definitely managing the corner. And the one thing that you are managing most in this game is the heat. Now, this is another card-playing game, so you're going to draw up a hand of 7 cards. And from that hand of 7 cards, depending on what gear you're in for this round, everyone's going to play that number of cards depending on their gear. And then in turn order, you reveal them and you kind of go through this whole process. Now, when you flip over those cards, they're going to range from like 1 up to 5, but mostly you're going to have a lot of
3s, 4s, a lot of the middle.
1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s. There's even a 0. And you might ask yourself, why would you want a 0? Well, that becomes important when you're in a higher gear and you don't want to go around one of these turns. But you also start with 1 or a few heat on the board.
6 heat on the board and 1 heat in your deck. And that's where the name of the game is derived from. This is a deck building game. But you're not just managing the cards in your deck, you're managing that heat supply as well. Because as you take heat, it goes from your little heat stack, your engine block stack, into your deck. It starts to clog up your deck. So not only does taking more heat mean you're drawing more heat and you're having less effective turns, if you ever completely run out and have to draw one, you spin out your card entirely. So really, the entire game revolves around these heat cards right here.
Yeah, and those heat cards specifically in this middle stack of your board, because if you don't have any there, you don't have any to spend. So when you spend them, you're spending them for all the different things to sort of push yourself to the limits. You're going around corners a little too fast. If you want to go a little further on your
A
turn.
little bit of a boost on your turn.
All sorts of different things will allow you to spend heat. And that's just the base game we're talking about, because this game has a whole nother aspect to it that brings in sort of a campaign where you can play like little 3-race.
Yeah, the championship system.
Championships.
Yeah, which seems... we haven't played through a full championship yet.
No, but it brings in...
But I want to.
It brings in so much that it's really crazy, because there's all these upgrades that you can get. There's sponsorship cards. One of the cool things, there's this. You can set these press tokens around certain corners. And if you push yourself to the limit, for instance, if you go around a corner with one of these press tokens, and you've used a slipstream just perfectly to move through one of these lines on the board, and the press is there, you're going to get a sponsorship card, and the sponsorship cards give you a little flavor to your game. They let you do a little something differently. It brings in so much. It is really, really cool thing. It's definitely a thing that makes me want to play it again. And in fact, when you're playing base game, you just race around the track twice.
Yeah.
And we played our 3-player game in probably less. With the teach, it was about an hour.
About an hour with the teach, yeah.
Yeah. Without the teach, we could have
45
blasted through it
minutes,
really
yeah.
quickly. So you could get through that fairly quickly.
It's not a long teach either. And I'll say that this is the kind of game that I'm gravitating towards these days. Games that play in an hour to an hour and a half that are very simple to play. I mean, all you're really doing on your turn is choosing which gear you're going into and then playing that exact number of cards. And that's really it. The rest of the stuff is stuff that just kind of happens. You have a lot of decisions to make, of course, like you have to decide when to change gears. You have to decide which cards in your hand you want to play, because there are a lot of things in the game that you have to like be considerate of, and a lot of things that are going to affect your decisions. But the actual mechanics of playing these cards is very simple and very accessible and makes the game very easy to teach.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, just to give you a little bit more of an idea, you can play a lot of cards, just have numbers on them. You're going to move that number of spaces. Then there's some of these stress cards, and you start with some stress cards.
You start with 3 stress cards.
Start with 3 stress cards, but there's things that'll allow, well, not allow you, will make you take more stress. You don't necessarily want these stress cards because they're kind of random. When they go into your hand, the only way to get rid of them out of your hand is to play them. And when you play them, you simply are going to, for every stress card that you've played, you're going to flip a card, you're going to top deck it off of your deck, and hopefully it's not going to push you through one of these turns further than you want to. Because, say, for example, if you went through this turn and you played 5 or less total value of cards, you're fine. But say you went through this turn and you played 9 total value of cards because you really wanted to get ahead. Well, you've gone 4 over the 5.
Over the speed limit.
So you have to spend 4 heat to be able to do that. And if you can, that's part of the game. You want to push yourself to the limit there, spend the heat. But if you can't spend the heat, then you're going to find yourself spinning out, going back to that turn potentially, taking more stress cards into your deck, which is a really interesting dynamic.
I mean, balancing those corners or timing those corners is, for me, the crux of the game. That's what makes the game stand out to me, because there are 4 different maps that come in the box, and you can play over that championship system. You can play over multiple maps, or you can just pick a map to play, and they all have different layouts, and they all have different sets of straightaways. They all have different formations of curves, but every corner, every one of these corners has that speed limit, and you really, really have to plan for these corners, because like David said, if you go too fast around a corner, you're adding heat from your engine section into your discard pile. And it's bad to run out, but you're going to want to push that speed limit, because you're going to want to take that corner as fast as possible while still not adding a ton of heat, right? Because you're managing that heat over the course of the game. And so you might be tempted to take a 5 at 7, but then you realize you've got a 2 coming right after that. And if you take the 5 at 7 and the 2 at 5, you've just added a ton of heat to your deck. Not only is your heat pool diminishing, so you can't do some of the other things like boost, but you're also going to potentially draw hands that are full of heat. There are ways to manage that. Of course, that's another aspect of the game, is managing that heat.
Getting your heat back into that heat pile with cooldowns, which is another thing. If you're in lower gears, if you're in last place, you're able to take heat cards out of your deck and put them back, or out of your hand and put them back into that pile, which is nice. So the game is all about sort of managing that back and forth.
Taking it, spending it.
So you have the heat to spend when you need, and then potentially if you've got it, you're off to the races to just get to the finish line, you don't really need as much heat. So Ryan, in our Just Played series, we talk about who this game is for and who this game is not for. Who would you say this game is for?
So, I mean, number one, casual gamers would love this game.
Agreed.
So people, and especially if they like the theme, this Formula One racing theme, if you have people in your life that are racing fans that aren't really super into games, this is a great starting point to get someone into more of a Euro-y style game. One thing I really like about this game is there's no dice involved. It's all deterministic.
Big difference between this and Formula Day, for sure.
Right, and it's based on the cards you play. The only amount of luck is if you play those cards that make you draw another card.
Yeah.
You could get anywhere from a 1 to a 4, and it could determine where you're going. And also there's the positioning. You kind of have to guess where other people are going to land, so you can maybe make the most of that slipstream. And so I think that those things are very Euro-style mechanics that they've put into a very Ameri-style package. You would expect this game to come with dice and things like that, but it doesn't. And so this is a great step into that world of Euro games.
Yeah, I totally agree. And as for who this is not for, I would say, and a lot of these kind of come down to this, for someone who's looking for a little bit more at the table from a game, and people sometimes just don't like race games, I would say in terms of what literally is a race game, you do get to the finish line, but it's not necessarily who gets past the finish line first who wins, because everyone's going to finish that turn. And if I went past the finish line first, but only just past, and then someone went past the finish line after me, but they went much further past, then they're going to win the race.
I mean, if I'm being completely honest with you, when we're talking about who this game is not for, I feel like most people can enjoy this game. I can't. I have a hard time seeing people sitting down playing this and going, I absolutely hated that experience.
Agreed.
Maybe it's not heavy enough for you. Maybe you like your racing games to be more complicated, like Rallyman, or you like the fine-tuning aspect of being able to kind of build your own car. Maybe you like the dice rolling of Formula D. That's fine. This game doesn't have that. But what it does have is a 90-minute, or actually an hour to 90-minute playtime, which if you don't like it, you didn't lose that much of your
That's
gaming
true.
day right there.
So you know what? This may be one of our first just plays where I'd say, there's not many people this isn't for. At least give it a try. If you don't want to give it a try, get out of here.
Because it's one of those games that's fun, and it has those fun moments. You have those fun, like, push your luck moments where you're like, oh, if I just time this perfectly, I get to land exactly where I need to be. And if somebody landed in front of me, I get that extra boost, that slipstream. It takes me,
it is very swingy.
Of cool moments.
It is. There's a lot of cool moments where you're like able to really, if you've managed things correctly, people might not expect. You're like, oh, and they'll comment. They're like, oh man, you manage that perfectly. Now, there is some luck too. You're drawing some cards, and in my last, when we played on my last sort of stretch of the long stretch here, I pulled like a 5 and a couple 4s and had a big race to the finish line.
But you can kind of plan for that, because when you're looking at your hand, you're determining what cards you're playing, and it might help to just play some low cards early, knowing that you're just getting those cards out of your deck for this particular shuffle, because at the end of your turn, you can discard any number of cards to draw back up to 7. So if you've planned your turn right, you can almost guarantee that your last hand is going to be full of 5s and 4s or whatever.
Yeah, this is hand management, deck management at its finest, in a really fun, accessible racing experience with a lot of variety, not with just 4 tracks, but then that whole campaign.
I know those sponsorship cards that come in, those garage upgrade cards that come in, and each one that comes in replaces cards in your deck. So not only are you getting a better card, you're getting rid of the weaker version. And it gives you a lot of fun ways. There's event cards that come up that give you some fun ways to earn cards or change things up. There's weather effects that come in and change some of the interactions on the board. But that crucial element of managing your heat and balancing your heat, I see that appealing to heavy gamers, people that like to really do hand management, and also to newer gamers that maybe might struggle to manage it, but would probably have a good time doing it as well.
Yeah, so that is how we felt about our first, at least couple plays of Heat. If you have any questions at all, please make them in the comments below. We'll be happy to get down there and answer everything we can. Until next time, though, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.